Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. We're embarking on a seriously deep dive into the life of an absolute icon of scientific history, Marie Curie. But listen, we aren't just going to sit here and list off her medals and achievements. We're zooming in on the fascinating and, frankly, deadly secret behind her life's work. What you could call the Rahasya di balik radioactivitas Marie, the secret behind Marie's radioactivity.
So you got to ask yourself, what exactly was the deadly secret behind her monumental success? How is it that the very thing that made her an immortal legend also ultimately sealed her fate? It's this massive, high-stakes mystery that weaves through literally every single triumph she achieved. And today, we are going to unpack exactly how it all happened.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp the sheer intensity of her day-to-day reality, consider this totally mind-blowing present-day fact. Marie's original research papers and lab notebooks from the 1890s, they are still so highly radioactive today that they are literally locked inside lead-lined boxes at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. If you actually want to go and read them, you have to suit up in full protective clothing. The radiation she was working with is still vividly alive well over a century later. Wild, right?
A youth full of twists and struggles.
Because, before she was unlocking the deepest secrets of the universe, her early life was defined by intense struggles and heartbreak. Born Maria Sklodowska in 1867 in Warsaw, she grew up under this really harsh Russian oppression where Polish culture and education were heavily restricted. Then, at just 10 years old in 1878, she loses her mother to tuberculosis, right after losing her sister to typhus. But her drive to learn? Absolutely unstoppable. Since women were barred from the official university, she joins this thing called the Flying University in the 1880s. It was this secret underground institution. Finally, in 1891, at the age of 24, she makes her big move to Paris to chase her destiny.
Uncovering the secret of radioactivity.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how perfectly it illustrates her absolute, unwavering dedication to science over normal societal expectations. When she married the incredibly accomplished French instructor Pierre Curie in 1895, she didn't show up in some traditional, extravagant wedding dress. Nope. Instead, she chose a dark blue laboratory dress. And get this, it wasn't just for the ceremony. She wore that exact same dress for years doing her daily laboratory research. Talk about practical. And it was exactly this relentless focus that led to a breakthrough that fundamentally changed how humanity understood the basic building blocks of matter. Inspired by the work of Henri Becquerel, she makes this monumental discovery. The intensity of radiation is directly proportional to the amount of uranium in a sample. This was huge. It proved that radiation wasn't just some chemical interaction happening on the surface. It came from the atoms themselves. She totally shattered the long-held belief that atoms were indivisible, solid little blocks, and she actually coined the term radioactivity to describe this very phenomenon. 4 tons. To put that massive number into perspective, let's talk about how visceral and physically exhausting this work actually was. Working out of this drafty, super poorly insulated wooden shed, she and Pierre manually processed over 4 tons of toxic raw pitchblende by hand. It was grueling, literally back-breaking labor. But it paid off, ultimately allowing her to isolate pure radium by December of 1898.
Triumph and tragedy. We're looking at a list of historical firsts that is just entirely unprecedented. In 1903, she becomes the first woman ever to win a Nobel Prize, sharing it in physics. Then, flash forward to 1911, she achieves her second Nobel, this time in chemistry. That made her the first person, not just first woman, first person, ever to win 2 Nobels. But you've got to notice that 1906 milestone sitting in the middle. She becomes the first female professor at the Sorbonne. But she only took that post because Pierre was tragically killed that year, struck instantly by a heavy horse-drawn wagon. She stepped into his vacant position, obviously deeply grieving, but totally undeterred in their shared mission.
World War X-ray hero.
When World War I breaks out, her resilience is tested on a massive global scale, and the sheer scope of her frontline heroism here is staggering. She develops 20 of these mobile radiological vehicles, people called them Little Curies. She installs 200 permanent radiological posts at field hospitals and personally trains over 1,500 technicians. Joined by her teenage daughter, Irene, she literally drove out to the front lines and operated the X-ray equipment herself to save soldiers' lives. But guys, there is a very dark seed of foreshadowing here. She operated all of this heavy-duty equipment with absolutely zero safety gear.
The price of a secret discovery. All of these monumental discoveries, these incredibly selfless acts, they demanded a devastating physical toll. There was just this heartbreaking, tragic irony to her work. The very elements she discovered, the ones she nurtured almost like her own children, were silently, slowly destroying her body. Because the hazards of ionizing radiation just weren't understood back then, she worked directly with radioactive materials without any shielding whatsoever. She'd casually carry glowing radioactive test tubes around in her pockets like loose change. She stored isotopes in her regular desk drawers. She was entirely, tragically unaware of the invisible danger surrounding her every single day.
Which sadly leads us to the devastating outcome on July 4th, 1934. Marie Curie passed away at the age of 66. The cause? Aplastic anemia. It's a condition caused by profound, irreversible damage to the bone marrow from long-term exposure to ionizing radiation. She gave literally everything she had, including her own life, to her research.
The eternal legacy of the scientist.
But her story does not end in tragedy, not even close. And this brilliantly illustrates how she fundamentally altered our world. She founded radium institutes in Paris and Warsaw that are still active today. In 1995, she became the first woman to be entombed in the Pantheon in Paris entirely on her own merits. We literally named the element curium and the scientific unit of radioactivity, the Curie, in her honor. And incredibly, her daughter Irene actually went on to win her own Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1935, making the Curies the most decorated family in Nobel history. The whole shebang.
So, we've seen her massive struggles, her unparalleled genius, and the silent, deadly cost of her life's work. It all boils down to this, and I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Is unlocking the universe's greatest secrets worth the ultimate personal sacrifice? It's a really heavy thought, but one that truly defines the immortal, glowing legacy of Marie Curie. Thanks for diving into this explainer with me today, and hey, keep questioning the fascinating world around you.